Where does this rank, Scott? All time of your Olympic favorites?
That's a great, and people were talking instant classic after the game, and I think it's fair to call it that. Now, you have to remember, it's a preliminary round game. No one goes home after this. The Russians keep playing, so do the Americans. And I was in Vancouver 4 years ago for the gold medal game. Of course, went to overtime. Sidney Crosby crushing the Americans' hopes in overtime after the Americans had tied late. So that's still probably number one. But just in terms of the vibe and the building and knowing how important these Olympics are and how hockey is important within the context of the Olympics here in Russia, the president was in attendance. So this is a pretty memorable game.
Time out. Number one, 2010, not Miracle on Ice.
Well, I'm not. How old do you think I am? I know the Miracle on Ice.
Come on, Scott.
I thought you were talking about games I'd actually seen live. I've got the disc at home. Of course I love that.
All right. For those who don't follow hockey, TJ Oshie just stepped into their world in a big way. And like me, they're probably wondering, how was he allowed to take 6 of those 8 shootout attempts?
It's interesting because it is a different rule set in international hockey. In the National Hockey League, when they have shootouts during the regular season, it has to be separate players who take every single shot. So no matter how long it goes, it's a different guy every time. But in international hockey, there's a set of 3 shootout shots to begin, and they have to be taken by 3 separate people. Now, TJ Oshie took the first one for the Americans and scored, but if it's still tied after those 3, then coach's decision. He can go to the same guy over and over again. We saw the Russians decide to alternate a bit between Ilya Kovalchuk and Pavel Datsyuk.
Right.
Dan Bylsma, he wanted TJ Oshie every time. He talked after the game, though. He said he lost him at one point. He missed one of the shots, and he disappeared down the end of the bench, so he was looking for him when he had to go back out again.
Thinking he was done for the night.
Well, he was trying to change the karma, I think, a little bit. So, but no, that's the rule. So as long as it takes, you can use the same guy.
Why did they go to him so much?
Well, having been part of the embedded with the selection process for the U.S. Olympic team and talking to or listening to the managers talk about who they wanted on this team, one of the things that kept coming up for TJ Oshie in terms of his value to the team, terrific checker, plays with David Backes in St. Louis, but he is one of the great shootout performers in the NHL, leads the NHL in terms of shootout accuracy, and that came up time and time again in forming this roster. What happens when we get to a shootout in Sochi? We need to have a guy like TJ Oshie on the roster.
And he was their go-to guy tonight, for sure. How will this game affect the NHL's resistance to the players being involved in the Olympics?
Yeah, I think it's another building block. We talked to Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly, my colleague Pierre LeBrun and I talked the other night, and it's a complex issue. The owners don't like to shut the league down for 3 weeks every 4 years. You know, the time change, a place like Sochi in South Korea in 4 years, it makes it problematic in terms of maintaining viewership and things like that. But the players love it, and anyone who watched that game today and doesn't become an instant fan of Olympic hockey, then you need to check out another sport, because I think it is one of those kinds of building block things that reinforces that the NHL really needs to be here. It's always hard to quantify the value of having the NHL players here, but boy, you watch that game today, and there's value everywhere in it.
And there's a lot of new fans watching hockey tonight thanks to that game.
Let's hope so.
Yeah. For more on our Olympic coverage and more stories on hockey, you can go to ESPN.com and ESPNW.